You're listening to the Grunt Workers Show, and I'm your host, James C. Zollman. Here's one of my favorite snippets from this episode.
Here's the key, though. Get the information, digest the information, act on the information. That's where the problem happens, is that having all the information in the world is great, but not if you don't do anything with it. It has to be acted upon. So if you have employees who are consistently pointing out one or two or three things in their environment that they say could use some improvement, guess what? You should do your best to improve that situation because it's going to pay off. And if you don't want to take the action, don't ask the question. That's the key.
Welcome to the Grunt Workers Show. I am so excited to welcome an industry veteran, a brilliant mind in the customer experience and even maybe more importantly, the employee experience space and the digital transformation space. This is Roy Atkinson. He's the CEO and principal advisor at Clifton Butterfield LLC. He's an industry analyst and speaker. It's an honor to have you on the show today, sir. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking.
Hey, Roy, one thing that I like to ask everybody at the very beginning of the show is, what are you working on? What has you excited in 2020?
So 2020 has been an interesting year, I think, for most people, but I don't like to think of it as an anomaly. I rather think of it as an accelerator. When we look at industry trends, there's been a tremendous amount of talk about things like distributed teams. Distributed teams have been around for a long time, especially in customer service contact centers that do follow the sun, technical support that follows the sun, teams in various countries or locations around the continent, whatever. So they've been around. Of course, now work from home is added to that. Right? But work from home is a trend that's been coming. It's been coming and coming and coming. And everybody's been talking about it for a long time. This year, organizations that said, no, we can't do work from home. We can't do that. We can't have our contact center people working from home. Guess what? Overnight, virtually, they became work from home people, and policies had to be updated and equipment had to be distributed and security policies and all kinds of things had to change very rapidly. However, what that did was it kind of kicked things into high gear. So 2020 has been a great accelerator. Online shopping and buying have been around for a long time, but look what happened this year with the incredible amount of money that's being spent on online shopping. It changes the game. Retail people are hurting. They have to figure out new delivery systems. All of that stuff that had to change for 2020. And it's not going to go away. We're not going to just flip back and be back in 2019 again. Things have changed now, and we have to come to terms with the way things are now and will be in the future. When things settle down health-wise in the world, we hope that we'll be able to do things a little bit more normally, what we think of as normal, like go out to the store or go out to a restaurant. But at the same time, we're going to be thinking about that differently, and we're going to be attending events differently, and we're going to be doing a lot of things differently. So 2020 is a big accelerator.
Yes, sir. I see that, and I feel the same way, especially being in digital. That digital transformation has been forced upon some companies because of this, but others, as you've clearly stated, have been taking advantage of this for quite some time, and they were possibly prepared for it. What have you done at Clifton Butterfield, and what are you seeing as far as the changes that need to be implemented on both the customer experience side and the employee experience side? Are you seeing that acceleration there as well? And what sort of adaptations have had to be made? I tend to ask these question stacks, so have at it.
That's fine. So when you think about customer experience, let's take a major department store. They looked at customer experience in a whole bunch of different ways. They, of course, if they're doing it right, they're mapping the journey from the time the customer finds out about their brand to the time that they are no longer doing business. And that means in a retail situation, they would maybe find your website, maybe get a sale flyer, maybe get an email from you. However they got in contact, they see something they like. Now they're going to go to the store and they're going to shop in the store, and they want that experience in the store to be good. Well, guess what happened in 2020? Not so much with going to the store. So now what you have to do, and you have to keep your brand consistent, right? You still have to provide that experience. If somebody shops at a high-end, especially a high-end retail store, they're used to a certain experience. If somebody shops in a Walmart, they're used to a certain experience. That needs to be as closely as possible replicated in the way they do business with you online. That's a whole different ballgame. And that requires a different set of tools and thinking. You want now, instead of looking at what department did they shop at, what did they buy where in the store, now you're looking at heat maps on the web. You're looking at how did they hit your self-service? Did they call your contact center? Did they look for a shopping assistance? How did they interact with you? And it may be totally different. It may not even mirror the way that they might have acted before. So there's a huge amount of change involved in this. And so you've got to update all those customer journey maps. You've got to update how you think about the tools that you use. You have to think about how your customers interacted with you yesterday, not last year. And that's different. I mean, when you think about the fact that people who were working from home and being at home a lot suddenly may have adopted mobile tools for shopping, which they didn't use before. But now it's the best way for them to interact. And I'll tell you a little story about a local store here where I live in South Carolina. Tiny little local grocery. They have a specialty. They tend to move out stuff that they buy from other supermarkets that's just short of the expiration date and knock it down to incredibly low prices. So it's a great place to shop. But when the pandemic hit, they didn't have a website. They got a website up and running. They hooked it into their inventory system. They provided online ordering so that you could set up your order. You could drive over to the store and they'd bring the order out to your car. Or they were spot on. And big box stores failed miserably. Personally, I experienced that where I was out in a parking lot waiting for hours, literally hours, for somebody to tell me whether my order was ready or not. Mm-hmm. So the experience with the little local store that just got hip to the jive was much better than the big box store that you would think would have the resources to do it right. And they didn't. So
that's amazing.
Retooling and rethinking through all of that stuff and thinking more. We'll get into employee experience, I'm sure, a little bit more, but we'll talk about first what that is and how it plays into customer experience a little bit too.
Wonderful. I think they're calling that process, by the way, I think it's called the BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store process. So with this transformation that you've been seeing everybody have to make from the store that wasn't online to the major retailers, with your experience, you're advising and consulting people from large enterprises down to small businesses. From what I understood, can you tell us a little bit more about your customer experience processes and employee experience processes from the small versus the enterprise, the tools that you might use or recommend? In fact, I believe you have what you call an experience ecosystem out there. What does that look like, and how does that fit in?
So yeah, the ecosystem is really our focus. It's 4 major areas. One is to focus on customer service. Now, if customer service sounds a little bit out of date right now, but that's where you have to start. You've got to aim your business at the customer. If you are not aiming your business at the customer, you have a problem, first of all, because nothing else is going to work right. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. And as we'll talk about more as we go on, employee experience underpins everything. If your employees are miserable, it is going to show. Shep Hyken, who's a friend of mine and well known in the customer experience world, says what happens on the inside shows on the outside. It's and the example that I use in that is I traveled a lot before this year. Have not been on an airplane since January 1st. Wow. But I would arrive at a hotel, I'd check in, and I'd walk down the hall, and there might be somebody vacuuming the hallway. And there's two possible things that are going to happen here. One of them is they kind of avert their eyes. Maybe they turn the vacuum off. Maybe they don't, but they don't make eye contact with me. And I continue to go to my room and I say, oh, okay. The other thing that can happen is the person stops, pulls aside, makes eye contact, gives me a smile, welcomes me to the hotel. That tells me that I am going to have a good experience because stem to stern, from the bottom to the top, everybody's there to get the job done for the customer. So customer experience happens in unexpected ways. And I mean, let's see, if you map that customer experience, that's going to be a touch point that you're going to want to talk about. So why is that person who's vacuuming the hallway, why are they happy to see you? Why do they stand aside and say hello? It's not just because they were trained to do that. It's because they're committed to the outcome for the customer. And the way that they're committed to the outcome for the customer is that they have a good employee experience. Their employer treats them fairly. They provide the right tools for the job. Maybe not everybody's pay is great, but even people who are doing what is called menial jobs have a tremendous impact. I was talking to a director of HR some years ago, and the gentleman who emptied the trash cans happened to come around, tapped at the door, and she beckoned him in, and he emptied the trash can and left. And she looked at me and she said, "Is the CEO here today?" And I said, "I don't know." She said, "You're right. I don't know either, but he's here." Right? The guy who empties the trash cans is a presence that you recognize and you wait for and you say hello to, whereas the CEO could be there or not. He's off, doing bigger things. But that experience is really important. And I think Jan Carlson said it best. If you're not familiar with Jan Carlson, he took over Scandinavian Airlines, SAS, when they were at the bottom of the barrel. They were rated the worst on time. They were rated the worst customer service. They were rated the worst, and they were losing money like crazy. In 2 years, Jan Carlson turned them into the top performing airline in the world. And he did that by focusing on the customer. And his saying was, if you are not directly supporting the customer, you'd better be supporting someone who is. So that's how it works inside your company. And if your employees, I've done studies where customer satisfaction in one instance with technical support was 5% higher on average in organizations that had high employee satisfaction. There's a direct correlation between those two things. You can't separate them. Better inside, better outside.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So how would you measure that, and what sort of tools are there for those who may want to attempt it themselves before hiring a pro? Or they may be just too small, but they want to at least take steps in the right direction. What sort of tools or metrics should they be measuring and trying to change?
So there are a couple of different things that you can do. One of them is to use a tool that's directly pointed at either customer experience or employee experience, or perhaps both. There are tools out there. I work with a company that's based in Finland that has a tool that measures both. And the way that it's done is just looking at one specific area of the company, which is information technology and the support system they have for information technology. And they look at two things. One is called the happiness rating. How happy are the employees with the service that they're getting from IT? And of course, that also includes employees that work in IT. They get to say how happy they are with the service that they get. And then the other side of it is, how was productivity affected with IT this particular time period, whatever that was. And this is measured daily. It's measured constantly, actually. Every time somebody has an interaction with IT, they get, click on the smiley face and say, how long were you down? And some of that information comes right out of the IT systems. So productivity gets affected one way or the other. And the most recent release, they put a quarterly report out, and they actually had employee satisfaction go up while productivity went slightly down. It was only a minute, but on average, productivity went down slightly. And I had a discussion with them about why I thought that might be the case. My take on it is that employees have become more tolerant because they know people are working from home. They know it takes a little bit longer to maybe find the information you're looking for, because not everybody is completely up to speed with all their knowledge management and everything else. All that digital stuff has to happen, and that's where the digital transformation part comes in, right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So it sounds like a survey. Talk to your employees. Maybe come up with a Google form if you're doing this the quick and dirty way. Come up with a Google form that measures the happiness level of your employees regularly. Ask them to fill it out regularly so that you constantly get that data. Maybe make it anonymous, especially if you're a small company, just so you can fix things that may be uncomfortable to bring up in person. Is that what I understand, at least on the employee experience side? Just gauge their happiness with a survey.
And it doesn't take much to set up a pulse survey. Mm-hmm. The key is to get, if you really want to measure employee experience, the key is to get that feedback as rapidly as possible. The closer to real time that you can get feedback, either from customers or employees, the better you can measure experience. Right? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
I feel bad about it. I feel bad about it now, but I might not feel bad about it 10 hours from now.
Yes.
Things may have changed. Something changed. So as close to real time as possible, you want to get that feedback. Pulse surveys are great if you do them consistently. Do a small survey, keep it short. I like to see surveys that are no longer than 5 questions. If you can do it in one question or 2 questions, and a comment box, always put the comment box in there. I did some research about a year and a half ago where one of the questions generated a disproportionate response in other, right? There's usually an other checkbox, and then you comment below. And that particular question, 25% of the people who responded to that survey selected other and gave responses. There were 38 pages. When I printed them out, there were 38 pages of comments. But it really told the story because they fell very neatly into 4 categories. So those 4 categories was where the improvement was needed. Bang, 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 bang. It was really very cool. So you have to pay attention to that free text portion of the survey. There are great tools out there for doing this, and not all of them are really pricey. You can use a free version of something like SurveyMonkey and get away with it. If your company is small and your survey is simple, even if your company is larger. Here's the key, though. Get the information, digest the information, act on the information. That's where the problem happens, is that having all the information in the world is great, but not if you don't do anything with it. It has to be acted upon. So if you have employees who are consistently pointing out 1 or 2 or 3 things in their environment that they say could use some improvement, guess what? You should do your best to improve that situation because it's going to pay off. And if you don't want to take the action, don't ask the question. That's the key.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant, Roy. So with the employee experience side, do you have any studies, or do you know of any studies or data that show results of happy employees on the bottom line? Customer experience increases. Obviously, happy customers, anecdotally, I've heard, yes, that increases revenue. But do you have any specific examples or maybe specific campaigns that you yourself have implemented where you came in, much like the study that you just mentioned, you found a few areas of improvement, that was done, it translated into dollars on the bottom line?
I don't recall the numbers right off the top of my head, but there is
That's
an
okay.
extensive study by Gallup,
Oh, Gallup. Love
and
Gallup.
Gallup, big study, and they released it in October of 2020. So it's current. It's right.
Oh,
It's
wow. That's
recent
very
information.
fresh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good
Mm.
information. And one of the things that they talk about in that particular study, it was an extensive study of employee experience and employee satisfaction, and they broke things down to quartiles, as Gallup is want to do,
Yes.
and the companies at the top in terms of employee engagement and employee experience were something like 41% higher in bottom line than the ones at the bottom quartile. It's
Wow.
astoundingly, I mean, it's really a huge disparate uh, amount that they are, almost every study that looks at employee engagement, employee experience, satisfaction, however you want to measure it, and they're all different, and effect on the bottom line shows specifically that companies that have engaged employees are doing better in the bottom line, almost every single one of them.
That's absolutely incredible. Now, of course, that's highly correlated, but it seems like it's a causal analysis as well. If your employees are happier, people around them seem to be happier, and happy people spend more. I think that's the story here. They spend considerably more from the sounds of it. That's amazing to hear, Roy. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
You going back to the four key areas, if I recall, I heard about the customer service focus. You've talked a little bit about employee experience. I think those were two. Were there a couple other areas in that experience ecosystem?
Yeah, the
And
third one, of
maybe I
course, is
missed.
customer experience,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a biggie, and that's not that new. But I think that people have to realize what the definition is, and it's not especially easy to measure. Customer experience, customer service. Okay, they had an interaction. They're happy afterwards. They liked the person who did the interaction with them. Great, terrific. But overall, through the life of their being a customer with your brand, are they happy? Not happy? Where did the unhappiness happen? Customer journey maps are pretty much invaluable. So customer experience is really important. Uh, how they find you, how they choose you above your competitors, how they contact you, all of that stuff is important to measure. Appropriate technology is the fourth area, and that verbiage is very carefully chosen. Going out and buying the latest shiny object, whether it be a contact center system or an IT service management tool or some other widget that is supposed to be the best thing on planet Earth and will make everything right. Yeah, don't buy that. Uh, do the work up front and decide what's appropriate for your company. And we try to help organizations with that. What do you need to spend? What should you spend it on? And the other thing is, and this is where a lot of blind spots happen, what technology do you already have that isn't optimized, that you're not using up to its capabilities? A lot of times, people miss the boat when they bring in a new technology, don't complete all the training, don't make sure all the employees are up to speed on that particular technology, and they lose 20, 30% of the capability of that particular technology. Or they have a module that came with something else they bought that they've never even used. So we try to sort that out and help people understand what they own, what they can do with it, and maybe where they need to spend a little money and improve what they have.
That sounds amazing. So can you speak to, Roy, and I understand that an organization like yours probably has a lot of NDAs. Can you sort of speak to an implementation where you came in and implemented these four areas for a company and saw a huge success? And what did that success look like for that company after you came in?
So we would love it if everybody bought into all four areas.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't, but we try to make sure that they understand this is an ecosystem. But I can tell you that the way we have applied this thinking in some medium-sized businesses has worked exceedingly well. They have improved their employee retention, which is important, unless you're trying to lay people off, which is, unfortunately a side effect of 2020 as well. But employee retention, especially in a high-end business, is exceedingly important now. You don't want to have to rehire people. And that's another reason for employee experience measurement, right? You want to keep the good people that you have, get them engaged, and now that you've spent the money on them, for goodness sake, hang on to them. Don't let them cost you turnover money because they left. So we've been able to save some money there and point people in the right directions. And we've definitely been able to help a couple of organizations with customer experience, specifically in the area of providing self-service. Self-service is pretty much omnipresent. All right, everybody talks about it, but frightfully few organizations get it right. And we've been able to turn a couple of organizations around there with their self-service, taking their knowledge management in general and helping them understand what customers want when they hit your self-service. There are tools available, talking about appropriate technology. There are tools available now that we've steered them toward where they can actually put in, something like a chatbot, and not a simple chatbot, but a chatbot that is contextually aware. So what is that employee doing right now? What application are they in? Oh, they have a question about it. Well, guess what? The bot is right there. They click on the bot. The bot already knows what application they're in and what they're working on. And so the answers that are provided by that bot are appropriate and specific to that particular operation that they're trying to get done. That's very different from being driven to a knowledge portal and having to sort through, do a find on some arcane terminology. It's a very different experience. So the back-end technologies have improved tremendously. Everybody likes to talk about AI and machine learning. When it's done right, it's great. And one of the keys that we focus on to have people not do is to have people arrive at a dead end. If their chatbot runs out of information, for example, if it's operating off keywords and has the knowledge base behind it, if the customer asks a question that's not in there or the bot can't sort through, it has to be able to hand off directly to somebody who's a live person. So all of that fits together, and then we can go on into omni-channel tools and how all of this fits together and how important it is to the customer experience. But that's just some ways that we try to help people get more attached to their customers and win their customers' trust and loyalty.
Sure, absolutely. And all of that has to do with marketing overall in general, because all of this directly impacts reputation, and reputation management is big. The marketers and marketing folks who are listening today, they probably watch reviews like crazy. They probably watch or use some of those reviews in advertising and more. So all of that is in direct relation to employee experience and customer experience. Do you have, or do you often see an SAS, going back to your airline story, do you see that a lot when you come in and help transform an organization? Do they fix their reputation? And if they do, is there a time frame that you can throw out there that you see it takes 6 months on average or a year on average, or how long does it take to fix a company's reputation on average, would you say?
I, for a long period of my life, was a very serious student of martial arts. I studied Shotokan karate for a lot of years.
Oh, wow.
There's a trophy over
That's
there
amazing.
somewhere.
That's awesome.
Shotokan is Japanese karate. It didn't come way back. It came from Okinawa. But anyway, Shotokan means the house of Shoto. Shoto was a poet and calligrapher in Japan. And Shoto founded this house of martial arts, and it still exists today. It's quite a popular form. It's a little bit different from some, and it's difficult. Trust me. And one of the stories that is traditional within Shotokan is that somebody comes to study, and they go for their first lesson and their second lesson. And part of the discipline of Shotokan in Japan is that students wash the floors down at the end of the session on their hands and knees. They soap the floor and scrub the floor with brushes, and they do all of that. It's kind of, remember Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid saying paint the fence and wax on, wax off? It's really that kind of thing. And so after a couple of weeks, the student's getting impatient. And he says to the master, he says, how long is it going to take me to learn this stuff? And the master replies, this lifetime and significant portions of the next.
Huh.
And basically what that means is that this isn't a project. And that's one of the things that I like to let people know right up front about customer experience, employee experience. It's not a project. It's not something you're going to start today and end in 6 months. This is a commitment. It's a commitment that means that you are changing the focus of your organization in certain areas. Do you still want to make money? Absolutely. But, otherwise it's not a business, right? Do you want to attract shareholders? If you're a public company, you absolutely want to do that. But stop thinking that it's a project and it will be done next year or the year after that. This is changing your direction permanently. And you look at an organization like, I'll take one that I do business with personally, LL Bean, who's been focused on the customer from day one. Great story, LL Bean. If you're not familiar with it, I won't go into it here for the sake of time, but it's an incredible story. They've been around since 1912, keeping customers happy. Guess what? They've been pleasing customers because they've been focused on pleasing the customer. They're the same internally as well. If you work for LL Bean, the people that do, work with you, your colleagues, treat you with the same amount of respect and commitment that they treat customers. It's completely all the way through the organization, and it shows. Again, what happens on the inside shows on the outside. So that type of commitment doesn't happen overnight. So let's say we're not going to come in and do something for you in a month, say, boom, and we're gone. What we try to do is give you the ideas and help you find the tools that will fulfill the commitment that you're making from the top, right? If you're not willing to make that commitment, then we're probably doomed to failure because we are not going to be able to change things for you. You have to change things from the inside.
That makes a lot of sense. And reputation isn't a one and done, just like the transformation you're discussing isn't one and done. It's once you are there and doing great, you have to maintain that greatness. Greatness isn't something that you just maintain and then it's done. So that makes a lot of sense, Roy. Thank you for sharing that amazing story. So zooming out a little bit, what inspired you to get into the customer experience and employee experience industry?
Well, partly I was inspired by my dad, and I'll just tell you a little bit about him. In his later career, he started out his working life as a machinist, and he was incredible at making stuff. I used to try to break stuff when I was a kid because he could fix it better than it existed in the first place. He never lost that skill of being able to. He could make something that would make whatever. The handle broke on my book bag, Dad. Okay, I'll make you a new handle. Boom, and it was better. That kind of skill. Mm-hmm. But later on in his career, he got into sales. He was a salesperson for a company that made electronic heat sealing and very early microwave equipment. Mm-hmm. And occasionally he would take me with him on Saturdays to go visit customers, or would take me on a school holiday when I had the free day and he needed to go visit a customer or something like that. He liked to take me to visit his customers, so I got to meet a lot of them. And one of the things that my dad was totally committed to was honesty, integrity, being upfront, transparent. Never saw that man tell a customer a fib. Was always forthright. Yeah, we screwed up. This machine isn't right. We need to fix that and get you back on the road here. Always was forthright, and a lot of his customers came to his funeral. Hundreds of them came to his funeral. It was really remarkable. They came from all over.
Wow.
It was, yeah, he had a reputation indeed, and it was all built one-on-one. It was all built, with his relationships with his customers. So that was a tremendous influence on me. That's where I learned from. And then I had a paper route as a kid, and I was the kid that got through no matter how deep the snow was, because I was committed to it, right? Some days I got through and the mail didn't. I just did all that kind of stuff. I mowed lawns, I walked dogs, I did all that things because I wanted to earn money for things that I wanted to do. I wanted to take guitar lessons, and I wanted to buy myself a nice guitar, which I did, saved up that money. Well, when I actually started a job, I got a job at what at the time was the second busiest supermarket in the world, and the busiest in North America. It was an astounding place just outside New York City. Lots of people from New York City came across to shop there, get their weekly groceries. It was incredible, just packed, just day and night. When they were open, there were lines at the cash registers. It was insane. But I started bagging groceries and then became a cashier, and then I got promoted into the customer service desk, and I spent the rest of my time at that store in the customer service desk, and that was great exposure. And I had a couple of super mentors there, because the reason that store was busy goes back again. How do you do that? You've got great customer focus, you deliver on what you say, and you make sure that your employees understand what they're doing, they know what the guidelines are, and you make sure that they're happy and committed in their jobs. Duh. I mean, it sounds so simple, but so many places miss the boat. So that was really, a very, very influential job in my past. And I've worked in sales, I've worked in banking, and lots of, face-to-face, and also in a lot of technical organizations. So it's been interesting, but it's always been focused on providing the customer with what they need and giving it to them in a way that they can believe in and come back to.
That's incredible. So it started with observing your dad and how he served and helped others, and that you chose to latch onto that and take that on as your own characteristic and character as Roy Atkinson. I love that story. I think that's incredibly powerful. So in a way, you could say that your dad is one of your professional heroes. So who else are the heroes in your life? And maybe this zooms out beyond the professional realm too. Who are Roy's heroes?
So yes, my dad would certainly be one, and his younger brother, for whom I am named. His name was actually Leroy. Mine is not, but he went by Roy for his whole life. My dad's younger brother signed up. He actually twisted my dad's arm to lie to get into the Army when he was 16 years old. Wow. That was in 1927. And he remained in the Army Air Corps, and then became the Air Force, of course, later on. And he remained a civilian employee of the Air Force until he retired well up into his 70s. But Uncle Roy was absolutely a hero. We're talking about this in December, and around the time of the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. The day after Pearl Harbor, my uncle had been assigned with his air group to the Philippines. He was a reconnaissance photographer, so they would fly around, take pictures, try to see what the enemy was doing and where the threats were coming from, that kind of thing. So they were very active at the beginning of the war, of course. Mm-hmm. Was shot down, captured, and shipped to Japan, where he spent the remainder of the war in a Japanese prison camp. Had his legs broken with a shovel, went through horrible deprivation. Because he had been in the Army since 1927, he was the highest ranking enlisted person there. And so he became the spokesperson for all the enlisted people and refused to do work that the Geneva Convention said they shouldn't do, that kind of thing, and he took whatever punishment was coming his way. Wow. When he came back to the United States after he was liberated in 1945, he weighed 96 pounds, and my uncle was 6'3". Oh my goodness. It took 6 months in the hospital to recover from that, and he limped for the rest of his life. But to my way of thinking, that is the kind of heroics that just boggles the mind. How you do that and how you follow through on your commitments to that extent is just mind-boggling. So if you think it's a tough road to get customer satisfaction going in your organization, think about guys like my uncle, and it puts things in perspective a little bit.
Wow. Wow. What an incredible story, Roy. That's awesome. You know, well, one thing I love about your heroes is it sounds like you have a very, very good, strong family unit and family history and examples in there. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's an incredibly powerful base for a person to have. And I love hearing that. I absolutely love hearing that.
Hey, on that note, I'd like to add something, and it may catch people off guard.
Sure.
A lot of organizations now, as long as we're talking about employee experience, they say, well, we're a family. Well, no, you're not. And it's important to recognize that you're not. You are an employer who has employees that expect to be treated fairly, but that you do not have a familial relationship with them. You can be friendly, but don't try to make believe that they're your family, because maybe in some cases where there's a family business involved, yes, but they're not your family. So think about that when you're marketing too. You know, if you have marketers sort of listening to this, think about that phrase, you're our family. You know, really, you're not. And you're kind of demeaning the familial relationship when you say that. It's great to treat people well and get along with them, and that's all good. But, you know, we have traumas inside of families that maybe you don't want to have in your organization too. So,
Sure. You have other heroes, of course, and I believe that prior to our recording of the show, you mentioned your spouse, your wife. She's been there on this entire journey with you, right?
absolutely. She's been unwavering in her support no matter what I was doing, and she is always a really good sounding board for my ideas. She'll straighten me out pretty quick, and she's also very helpful in she's a trained and professional proofreader, so she's great with reviewing things that I've written.
Perfect.
Everybody so yeah, she's super. Absolutely. And of course, this year, 2020, we've been in the house pretty much 24/7, and we have not killed each other. I'm surprised at this point that, you know, I haven't been hit over the head with a baseball bat a couple of times, but, you know, she's right there.
That's a win. That's a win in my book. That's
it
awesome,
is a win.
Roy. Hey, earlier, or I read somewhere or saw a video of you somewhere describing a story about another family, the Wright brothers. And I love that story, and I would love to hear that again, if you don't mind sharing that on our show.
Well, it's kind of interesting to think about the Wright brothers, and here's my little curve on the Wright brothers story. I spoke at Interop 2020, Interop Digital Conference, and I started out the talk by showing a picture of the monument to the Wright brothers without displaying the whole thing. That's in Kitty Hawk. And I said, does anybody know what this is? And I said, it's the Wright brothers. And so what do the Wright brothers have to do with digital transformation? Where does this connection come from? Well, here's the thing. The Wright brothers are a really good demonstration of what transformation really means. Transformation is different from change. And I illustrated that by talking about how the Wright brothers went from a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio, to producing the first powered aircraft that flew. That's a transformation of business, to go from a bicycle shop to producing aircraft, to do something that nobody had ever done before from making bicycles. That's astounding. At the same exact time that the Wright brothers were getting off the ground in Kitty Hawk in 1903, Harley and Davidson were getting together and built their first motorcycles in 1903. They took bicycles and put motors on them. They built a very successful business. They did not transform the bicycle business to any great extent. They put power behind the bicycle, right? And built a great business. The Wright brothers changed the world.
Absolutely. And to take that into digital transformation, digital is sort of like that engine or that machine, putting it behind what already exists. Is that sort of the tie-in there?
The way I talk about digital transformation is that technology is the enabler of digital transformation. It's not the goal. You
Ooh,
don't
I like
start
that.
and end talking about the technology. You use the technology to enable the goals that you have. The transformation is changing your business in ways that make sense in today's world, in ways that make sense for these guys and for the other devices that we all carry now, the ways that we do business now, transforming that, pen and paper or that local store that doesn't have an inventory system, whatever it happens to be, to get it to the new age of digital business. It doesn't start with the technology; it ends with the technology. It starts with the people and the processes. People, process, technology, and I usually say in that order. Technology is the underlying enabler that makes the rest go.
I love that. Roy, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you. I know we're nearing the end of the show time here. Do you have any final words of advice that you would like to share before we stop the show? Stop the
Oh,
recording.
for sure, stay focused. Remember that it doesn't happen overnight. Remember, as I said earlier, it's not a project that doesn't have an end date. You're making a commitment. And you have to pick your battles, right? You have to decide what you're going to commit to. And there's an old joke about the pig and the chicken who are talking about breakfast, and the breakfast is bacon and eggs, and the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. And so it's that kind of commitment that you have to say, this is what we're doing, and stay focused on that. Not, we'll try this, and if it doesn't work, we're going to change. As soon as you say that, you've undercut yourself. So commit to it and get it done.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Roy. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.